All right. It's a little after 6, so we are going to get going with our program while everyone continues to log in. Good evening, everyone who is joining us. Welcome to the SEMC AAMG Launchpad program called Landing a Board Seat, What It Really Means to Serve. My name is Zinnia Willits, and I am the Executive Director of the Southeastern Museums Conference. A warm welcome to all of you who are joining us tonight. For those who are not familiar with SEMC, we are a regional professional organization representing museums and museum staff in the 12 southeastern states, as well as in the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. And we have a membership of over 2,000, and we're continuing to grow. So we hope you will consider joining us. And on behalf of SEMC, we're thrilled to be part of today's program, and even more excited that it was developed in continued partnership with the Association of Academic Museums and Galleries. The SEMC AAMG collaboration on Launchpad programs is a really good example of the power of partnerships, peer-to-peer connection, learning, and camaraderie. And I'm really thankful to Alexandra Chamberlain, AAMG's virtual administrator, and Christina DeRocher, AAMG's current president, for oversight and collaboration on these sessions. We're also thankful to Banks Creative for the wonderful design of Launchpad graphics and sponsorship of tonight's program. Now I'm going to turn it over briefly to Heather Nowak, who is SEMC's program administrator, to go over just a few housekeeping notes before we begin tonight's discussion with our panel.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Heather Nowak, and as Zinnia mentioned, I'm the program administrator for the Southeastern Museums Conference. So quickly before getting started, I'll cover a few housekeeping items. If you need closed captioning, it is available. Click the CC button in your Zoom screen and enable the auto transcription feature. You can also download a full transcript of the program by clicking More at the bottom of your Zoom screen, choose Captions, and then View Full Transcript. The program today is being recorded and will be emailed to each of you. Since we are in a webinar format today, we encourage you to utilize the chat to introduce yourself and share thoughts or ideas. Please feel free to ask questions along the way in the Q&A feature, and we will do our very best to get through them all by the end of the program. I would also like to take a moment to mention that registration to both SEMC and AAMG's annual meetings are now open. AAMG's annual meeting will take place this June in Iowa City, Iowa, and SEMC's annual meeting will take place this September in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. We will be happy to share all the details about that in the chat. Additionally, SEMC is in the middle of its 75th anniversary virtual learning series, and our next virtual program will be honoring African American history in America's 250th on May 12th at 1 p.m. Eastern. AAMG also has a professional development program coming up on May 6th at Yale University, so please check those out. Well, we have a fantastic conversation in store this evening, so let's get started. It's my pleasure to introduce our panelist. Joining us is Celine Anchetta, Director of Development at the Halsey Institute of Contemporary Art in Charleston, South Carolina. Craig Hadley, Executive Director and Chief Curator at the Dennis Museum Center at Northwestern Michigan College in Traverse City. Cindy Malinek, Executive Director at the Jewel Collins Smith Museum of Fine Art at Auburn University in Auburn, Alabama. Katie Lee Coven, Executive Director and Chief Curator at the Nora Eccles Harrison Museum of Art at Utah State University in Logan, Utah. Zinnia Willits, SEMC's Executive Director, will be moderating the discussion. Many thanks to all of our panelists today for sharing their experiences and insight with us, and I now turn it back over to Zinnia to get us started.
Thanks, Heather. First of all, I love please introduce yourself in the chat. We all love to see people from all over the country joining us for these sessions. We're going to be pretty informal tonight. As I said before, I am Zinnia Willits. I'm the Executive Director of the Southeastern Museums Conference. I've been in this role for about 5-6 years. They've been long years, y'all. But before that, I spent about 20 years at the Gibbs Museum of Art in Charleston, South Carolina. So I am also a museum person. And before I took this role, I was actually the president of the board of the Southeastern Museums Conference. So, first of all, I don't recommend that going from being the president of a board to the executive director of the same board. It is a strange transition, but I've had the opportunity to experience board service really on both sides because now I lead a board, from the governance side to a staff leadership perspective. So I'm really honored to be able to facilitate this discussion with this esteemed panel. And at this point, I would ask our fellow panelists to go ahead and turn on your cameras. Just a little bit more about me. In addition to what I do, I also currently serve on two different boards. The Charleston area therapeutic riding, which is as equine therapy. So my daughter grew up riding horses, and I'm on that board. And I've recently joined the board of the South Carolina Arts Foundation. So that's a lot of different, diverse board services. It's a little all over the place, but I'm happy to share experiences and talk with my fellow panelists here. So our conversation for this program is really going to be centered on a question that comes up a lot, but isn't always really defined. And that's, what does it actually mean to be a board? And I was telling the group earlier, I teach adjunct for College of Charleston in the arts management program. My class is called Managing Arts and Cultural Resources. And we talk about boards as a resource. And one of my students this semester was like, so how do you learn how to be on a board? Like who teaches you that? Where does that training come from? And I didn't really have an answer because all of the board service that I've done, I've kind of just gotten thrown in and then you learn that particular board. But that was one of the reasons. So students, the things that you say in class, we hear you. And we like take those of us working in the field, we take what you say and we're trying to bring it into these professional settings so that we can have these kinds of conversations. So, for many, whether you're a student or you're early in your career or you're more established, this whole idea of board service can feel a little opaque. You might hear people like me saying, oh, it's important for you to do this for leadership and for networking development, but we don't actually explain like what the day-to-day reality or pathways or expectations are, and it's not always that obvious. So the goal of this program is to demystify that through the experience of my fellow panelists here. And as a group, we're going to talk about what boards actually do, what the members of various types of boards might be responsible for, how decisions get made, and that's going to vary, I think, from case to case, and what the experience might really be like behind the scenes, because board service is a commitment. Whether you're leading a board or whether you've committed to be on one, you're making a purposeful choice to do that. And we're also going to try and explore for all of you how students and emerging museum professionals might begin to explore board service, whether through advisory boards or junior boards or full governing boards, whatever is available. All right, so to begin tonight's conversation, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to briefly introduce themselves, share the kind of boards that they've worked with, and then I want you to tell me one word at the beginning of this program that you associate with effective board service. And Craig, I'm going to go ahead and put you in the hot seat first.
Hey, good evening. Craig Hadley again. I'm at the Denos Museum Center in Traverse City, Michigan. Uh, had the pleasure of serving at three different academic museums over nearly 20 years now, predominantly in the Midwest. Um, yeah, thinking about board service, I've served on a variety of boards, AAMG since 20, I think 14 or 15 now in a variety of capacities. I've also served on our International Affairs Forum board here at Northwestern Michigan College. I had a three-year run on that board. And then I also served on a local county historical society board when I lived in Indiana. So I've worked on a variety of boards. I've also, of course, worked pretty closely with boards of trustees at the three various colleges where I've worked, all with various degrees of engagement, right? Some it was much more separated, and others like NMC, where I am now, I have pretty easy access to the board when needed. My one word, I think, would definitely be communication. So like transparent sort of communication for effective board. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Craig. I'm going to remember that. All right. Craig says communication. Celine, let's go to you next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Celine Anchetta, and I'm the Director of Development at the Halsey Institute of Contemporary Art here in Charleston, South Carolina at the College of Charleston. Um, I haven't been a part of too many boards, but I have been a part of two boards, one of them being the Low Country chapter for the Association of Fundraising Professionals, and have held various leadership roles, bounced around in different chair roles, and then have also been involved with Redux Contemporary Art Center, which is a arts organization here in Charleston. And then another piece of experience that I have working directly with boards is at my own institution. We don't have a fiduciary board. It's more of an advisory board, and I'm sure we'll talk more about the differences
Mhm.
within our conversation, but our advisory board, we treat them more as thought partners, especially in when we're faced with some challenges and we just need some outside perspective. They're always really great to lean on, especially if you've been looking at something for too long. um, so, and then I've also just been a part of different committees like the SCMC's programs committee and also a grant review committee at a foundation here. But yeah, so that's the extent of my board service. But one word that I would describe for effective board service, oh, there are so many words, but I
Gotta
think
do
one,
one.
I know, I guess clarity, in terms of expectations for board members when you're coming on as a
Yes.
board and when you're coming on as a board member and board members that are coming on to your board as well. I think that's really important.
Great. Thank you, Celine. All right. We got communication, we got clarity. Katie, I'm going to go to you next.
Hey, hi, I'm Katie Lee Coben. I'm the Executive Director and Chief Curator for the Nora Eccles Harrison Museum of Art at Utah State University. And I have served on a number of boards and different capacities over the years. And like Celine, being at an academic museum, I also oversee our what we call an advancement advisory board. And in terms of service on boards, I have served on museum boards like the Black Mountain College Museum Board in North Carolina, a local arts festival board, which was really more of a working board. It was a fiduciary, board, but it was a working board. AAMG, like Craig, we both, I think, started 2014 or 15. I think it was 14. On the AAMG board, and that's very much a working board. While it is so, I think talking about some of the nuances it will be really useful for this conversation. I also was elected to uh, be on our Logan City Council. So I am now an elected official. So
Ooh,
I have served in capacities of like advisory committees and boards in my elected role as well, which is something else that maybe, I'm just thinking of different avenues of engagement and getting involved to the questions, Zinnia, that your student kind of posed and like, how do you get there? So
learn.
I thought that would be worth mentioning as well. In terms of a word, the first word that came to my mind, and I vacillated between a couple of words, but advancing was really the word that came to my mind because regardless of what type of board and the function of your role within that board, like why you were recruited, for instance. There are different reasons we're often asked to serve on a board in terms of our experience and our abilities and et cetera. It is always there to advance that organization, to help, advance what they're doing. So that's where that came from.
Great. Thank you, Katie. So are you Councilwoman Katie?
I guess, and certain, so I just say, call me Katie. But yes.
Okay. Okay, Cindy, bring us home on this section.
Bring you home. And Katie, you're a braver woman than I.
Yeah.
Run for elected office. I'm Cindy Malinek. I'm the director of Auburn University's Art Museum. And I may have, I don't know if it's the least amount of board service of the group here, but I have certainly been serving boards for decades. So um, I've got a lot of empathy for staff when I think about the board service that I have now. I'm on the board, have recently joined the board at AAMG. I'm also the chair of the board of Native Bound Unbound, which is not an arts organization, but it's a small growing nonprofit out of New Mexico that's focused on excavating and sharing the stories of enslaved indigenous people across the hemisphere. So it's amazing and profound work, and it's my honor to be the chair of that small board. The word that came to mind, I thought we were going to be on a C roll for a minute here, but my word was collegiality, and the more collegiality there is between board members, I feel like the more effective the board can be to advance, right? To advance the work of the institution. The more collegiality there is, there's more clarity around roles, the board's role, the staff's role, the work that's ahead, communicating about all of that. So, sometimes boards often have to tackle serious issues. It can be, depending on the board, it can be staff. It can be if it's a fiduciary board, you're reviewing the executive. It's fundraising. I mean, it's all kinds of things. So the more collegiality there is between the board members themselves, where they actually have a bond, and then of course collegiality with the staff, that goes a long way towards moving the institution ahead, or the organization ahead. So that would be my word.
Great. Thank you, Cindy. And I think I appreciate you all talking about your board service, because I really do. While we're primarily focused tonight on museum boards, because that's what our two organizations are representing, each of us have these kind of museum adjacent board experiences, and that for anyone on this call, those small nonprofits around where you live, the arts councils, the galleries, these little startup nonprofits, boards are really important to helping them grow. And we can talk more about that later, but those are definitely a way in. So think about that. And just before I move on, my one word that I associate with boards, especially now that I lead one, is just the word we. When you have a board, moving it from a bunch of I's, I'm this, I think that, I think that. The board is a collective we that should be, maybe this is my Zinnia opinion, but should be working together as a unit. In many cases for the benefit of the organization. So that's what I would add to that. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about what these boards actually do. And we've already thrown out some terms that we probably need to qualify, break down. I heard fiduciary board, I heard advisory board, I heard all sorts of things. So Craig, I'm going to start with you on this one. And when people hear being on a board, it's kind of vague, but what do boards actually do? And if you want to break down those two, however you want to answer that, I'd love it.
Yeah. So I thought about this in a variety of ways. I'll tackle that first, right? So when we think about the work that we're doing at AAMG, for example, we're providing financial oversight for the organization. We have contract employees. There's all kinds of different mechanics there. Likewise, when I think about, for example, I'm at a 2-year community college, and we have, an elected board of trustees, and then we have, of course, the college president. That board is primarily providing that fiduciary oversight. So they're not necessarily crafting curriculum or ensuring that that gets approved, right? There's internal committees that are doing that work. The president and all of the president's associates and employees are charged with carrying out that mission. And so the board of trustees in that sense is sort of, there's a policy committee, there's a finance committee, but again, they're primarily really looking at financial expenditure. On the other hand, right, we have boards where we're really looking for advisory, assistance or expertise. You could need a board that's comprised of a variety of different professions or types of expertise that could be useful in a different situation. So again, it really depends on the type of organization and the way it functions. I also think about the practical work that many of our boards do, which is really providing accountability and oversight, ultimately for the organization and its mission. So in the truest sense, right, the board is sort of the final authority on ensuring that accountability is being achieved, ultimately for stakeholders who are utilizing perhaps the services of that organization, but also for the organization's bylaws, right? So our organizations are all set up perhaps differently. We're incorporated in a state. In our case with AMG, we're incorporated in Pennsylvania. So we have to ensure that the organization is complying with Pennsylvania law, despite the fact that we are a national organization. So, it's ensuring organizational focus. I wrote down, boards are often that stopgap in ensuring that we sort of mitigate that mission drift. Like, are we doing the things that our bylaws, our mission, really intended for us to do? Or are we starting to branch out into areas where maybe we don't have any business expanding services in that way? And lastly, I think about, boards really stewarding the organization in that moment, in the organization's life cycle. So myself and Katie and Cindy happen to be here with AMG in this moment, as part of the board. But it's really our job to make sure that that organization is well cared for and it can be passed on to a new board and a new generation of leaders when the time comes.
Okay, that's great. And I will definitely want to dig into that later about the idea of like passive versus active service as a board member, because I think it's really interesting. So thank you for that, Craig. Katie, I'm gonna pop this one to you. Because I feel like this is really something we have to break down. But what are the core responsibilities of a board member versus staff? And where's that line and where might it blur? Just maybe your experience or however you want to answer that.
Absolutely. So I was thinking about, I think one of the things that's worth understanding in the context of this conversation are the different types of boards, because I think that line of staff and board um, it varies. So if you have, since we've been talking about AAMG, I'll use that one as an example since I've been on that board. And it sounds like maybe Zinnia, I wonder with SEMC if this is, I don't know if this is what happened there, but when we joined the board, when Craig and I joined the board, it was certainly much more of a working board. And if we think of, they're all nonprofit, the advisory boards really, because you're under a parent organization that has a fiduciary board. So and having that advisory kind of board. But governing and working boards are what you see with more nonprofits. So working board is going to be really a small nonprofit organization where you don't have paid staff and the board members are working on behalf of that organization in a volunteer capacity. AAMG was a working board and is gradually moving more towards being a governing board. And it's been interesting for us. And we went to becoming more of a governing board when we hired an employee. And now we have two employees that we contract. And when we hired those individuals, they then were there to do the day-to-day operations, and the board members become less involved in day-to-day and more involved with governance. And so another example I would give is there's a local arts festival that I served on a number of years ago here in Logan called Summerfest, and it was a working board. Everyone had a responsibility. Um, as part of the festival, some people were looking at the arts booths for it. Some people were overseeing music for that festival. Some people were, AAMG, we had some of us overseeing conference planning and the components of conference. And so when I say a working board, you literally have responsibilities relative to the actual functioning of the organization. Whereas the governing board, you are really helping support the staff and carrying out the mission of the organization and advancing it. So it's a now, so I kind of went down that rabbit hole a little bit because I felt like that's helpful in
Mhm.
understanding the role of staff and the role of board. You always have often, the director of the organization being the point person for when you have a governing board, the staff executive director being the person liaising and working with um, the governing board. Uh, and so, I mean, generally, staff are doing day-to-day operations and helping to carry out the mission, and board are there in a supportive role. But when you have a working board, it's a little different because you don't have staff. So that's kind of,
No,
uh,
I mean, I think that distinction is really important. And I think the lesson there also is if you are asked to join a board, to have a very clear understanding of what type of board it is. And as a side story, that board I'm on, the South Carolina Arts Foundation, I was asked to be on it. And I think my ego said yes before I actually, and again, this is all a good thing, but it is flattering to be asked to be on a board. What I realized very quickly, that board, there is no executive director. That is a fundraising board. That is the whole mission of the board is to raise money. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is quite what I thought. But it's kind of it's maybe it's a cautionary tale, but to really have an understanding. And if you're leading a board, I'm thinking about SEMC's board. If I said, what kind of board are you? I would hope that they would say governance and fiduciary. But I saw someone's comment in the chat. That doesn't mean that they don't actually, they do work actively with I mean, I need their help. We have three staff. So there's that, but we can talk about that too. Um, so I'm just going to keep moving us forward because I feel like we've got a lot to cover here. And Cindy and Celine, this is kind of for both of y'all because you're both at university affiliated museums. And I think that you both have advisory boards. So maybe if you each want to just kind of weigh in on what your two different boards actually do. And Cindy, I'll start with you, and then Celine will wrap up with you.
Okay. Right, we have an advisory board and it has bylaws and that I developed, wrote, revised many years ago, maximum of 15 members. And advisory means exactly that. They hold no fiduciary responsibility. And for everybody that's listening, that means they do not review me, they do not review employees, they do not have a legal or financial responsibility for the organization. That at this university is, and with the other folks that have mentioned, it's at our board of trustees level. So the board of trustees eventually could get involved in something here, I suppose, if it got to that point, but it would never get to that point. I wouldn't want it to get to that point, except if it's a happy thing. They want to come and, give us a lot of money or something. But the advisory board is just that and it's not comprised of other museum professionals. So the staff here, we're the museum professionals. We know what it means to, install an exhibit or to contact an artist or to present a lecture series, all of those kinds of things. We don't need an attorney to give us advice legally, right? We've got general counsel. At the same time, people that have experience or expertise in certain fields have an understanding and an empathy for what and a experience for some of the issues that come up. It also is, to be quite frank, protection for me, right? So that I'm not considered to be like this rogue director that's going off and doing whatever, something crazy. I've got a board. We meet 3 times a year, only 3 times a year, and we keep them abreast of what's going on. We ask their opinion. We even ask them to weigh in on certain things, but it's always framed with um, it's always framed with the knowledge that their opinion is important, and then staff takes it and does with it what we need to do. I can always use my board to say to my boss, to Dr. Wen, I've run this by the advisory board and they're good with it. Or it was a key conversation in a meeting and they voted to endorse doing X, Y, and Z. There's a lot that happens before a conversation that happens with a board because I'm either softening people up or I'm getting their opinions in advance. But in general, they're great sounding boards. They have a good sense of optics in a way sometimes that I can be in a bubble, and so they can help us think like, be sure you're thinking of X, or don't forget about this stakeholder group. So that's really what they are. I recently had a board member say to me that they've heard this new phrase, or this new phrase, the 3 Ws of board service, which is wealth, wisdom, and work. And we've talked about work. There are all kinds of different ways to work. Wealth can be you can write a check, Cindy, or you can raise money, but you can also open a door. And wisdom is just that, whether you're, a new board member, but you bring your experience, or you've been around a long time. So I count on the Jules Advisory Board for that, for those 3 Ws, for their support and their enthusiasm and their experience, especially working in the ecosystem of this university. But I do not worry. I've got a boss that's going to review me, do my evaluation. I've got a whole finance office that I work with on budgets. Again, a general counsel's office. So it's a different animal. It's an interesting animal to manage and massage and use appropriately and rely on. But been a great model to have here.
Yeah, that's very different than mine. Thank
Yeah.
you. All right, Celine, what does the board at the Halsey look like?
So very similar to what Cindy said, our board at the Halsey is an advisory one, and we also have bylaws. Our board right now is about 10 members. It's a split between community members in Charleston, but also faculty at the College of Charleston, just to keep us adjacent and an arm's length, or connected to the university and their programming and faculty for any joint initiatives that we might do across campus with students, because on one end we're a community organization, but on the other end we're also still a university. So we kind of have to teeter on both, or hit both sides of the spectrum. But because our board is made up of community members and faculty members, we really, like I said before, we use or rely on them for their expertise. We think of them more as thought partners and connectors. I went to a session at SEMC last year and it was on boards, and the person presenting ended the session with just a bunch of doors being opened in the slideshow. And he said, honestly, the main thing that board members should be doing is opening doors for you. And ever since then, that's what I've been trying to reiterate to our board. It's just a simple way to think about how they can steward the organization and help us get to that visionary place that we would like to be at. Additionally, they help us think through initiatives and just strategize ways to achieve our goals, whether that is, like I said, opening doors to maybe a new network that we haven't tapped into yet, or proofreading something that maybe the whole staff has looked at many times, like I've said before, and they're just new eyes to review things. And then lastly, they are our biggest cheerleaders and advocates of the Halsey Institute. But I will say as well, with that, one of our new board members was chatting with me, and she was a little this is the first board she's ever served on, and she was a little confused on like what the service of a board is. And she had a good metaphor, and she said, I'm a cheerleader for the Halsey, but I can't be a cheerleader without any pom-poms. And so that's why I said clarity in the beginning, because that's something that we're kind of working through right now as we start nominating new board members, is starting to be a little bit more clear about our expectations of our board members, from, our executive committee down to our committee members who are just on committees, not even board members. Um, but yeah, I thought that was very meaningful just to think about. Yeah, they are cheerleaders for us, but they can't help us and can't be cheerleaders if they don't have direction from us or a plan or goals. Because what are if we don't have our goals and plans and direction in place, then our board members will also be in that same boat. So we're kind of just navigating murky waters at the same time and not really advancing the organization. So that's why I mentioned clarity, just to have expectations for those coming on to the board and whenever you're joining to other boards, because you people volunteer their time and you don't want to waste their time, honestly, because people will step down, and um, it's very clear to see, um, like from an organization, if the expectations aren't there. So that's we're trying to work through our board right now, um, especially as we nominate more people, because we have a max of 20 people, and that's a switch. I think the minimum before was 20. I don't know who did that, but that would have been too much. So I recommended we do a max of 20 instead. But as a staff, we've discussed many times that we just need new people on the board. Some of the board members have been on for a long time, and we do have board terms, but it's been we've had a lot of transitions at the Halsey, from mainly director transitions. So it's been a little, not crazy, but just like ambiguous, I guess. And so we're
Those are all, Celine, those are like great. No, like all of the things that you all have said in terms of if you're considering board service, to ask the questions, what kind of board is this? Ask about training,
yes,
what are the expectations? What are the term limits? Because you've all described very similar but different boards, from AAMG to university boards to, I'm brought out the random, like it's an all fundraising board, but these are good, the tools you need, and that about the having the pom-poms, because being on a board without the pom-poms, you need them, you need the tools. And before we move on to like the sort of time commitment and what it's like to be on a board, Cindy, you mentioned the three W's. I was going to do this later, but and Celine, you kind of hit on it too. My thing I've always heard is that if you're on a board, you should be one of three things. You should be a doer, a donor, or a door opener. Like so when you're asked to be on a board or you're considering it, you have to think like which role can I fill? And so that's an interesting transition into something that is I don't want to call it a misconception because I think it's a reality here, but I'd like to talk about the fundraising, the role of fundraising on for board service. So, Craig, I started that one with you. Um, in your experience, how central is it to board service, at least the boards that you've been on?
Yeah, and I think this has come up already, but I think it's entirely dependent on the board and the board's needs, where it is kind of in its life cycle, strategic planning, all the elements that make every board unique and different. Um, I have I have not been in Zinnia's situation where I walked into a board and then later found out it was, pretty much 100% fundraising sort of
That
expectation.
was my fault for not doing my research.
But I mean, it certainly happens. There are certainly, um, I would say typically financial expectations, certainly for a board when it comes to our, IRS 990 forms that we're filing. And um, can the organization say, yes, 100% of our board members are providing some sort of donation, right? But no, I have not personally served on a board where fundraising was like the core sort of tenet or expectation for me as a board member. And, again, there are a variety of different ways this can be done. It could be strictly cash donation. It could be um, different types of events that support the organization to raise funds, right? Like galas are pretty common, silent auctions, memberships, all kinds of different revenue streams that could materialize. Certainly for us with AAMG, corporate sponsorships, right? That's pretty common, SEMC as well, even when we think about this program that we're participating in. But then there's also in addition to the sort of cash, then there's in kind and other types of ways that fundraising could materialize. And lastly, I should also mention that as boards, right, we have to be very aware and very cognizant of potential conflicts of interest, right? So thinking about the types of relationships that I bring to a particular board, are there real or potentially just as damaging perceived conflicts of interest if I were to enter into an agreement with a contractor or accept some sort of cash or in-kind gift? Could that potentially jeopardize the organization's standing or their reputation? So all of that kind of gets folded back into the complexities of fundraising. So.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I guess really Cindy, Celine, or Katie, are any of the boards that you're associated with, did they have or have been, do they have a giving requirement? As whoever wants to, Cindy, do you want to, or Katie, I saw you click off first.
Yeah, so actually, it's interesting. We in our charter for our so being at an academic museum, and we're all at academic, but have done other things as well. So um, we have what I call our advancement advisory board. I used to only call it advisory board, but I added advancement to that to create clarity about expectations. And at that time, I also actually shifted our faculty who had been on the board into a faculty advisory committee that was separate, so that I could create it into more of an advancement board with a minimum giving level. But I did not initially, and we were just recently talking about this, actually put it in our charter, our bylaws, if you will, as far as the outline of expectations, and responsibilities, of what this board is comprised of and what they do. So it's an informal amount currently that is understood that all board members give. But I was recently talking to a donor who's not on our board, who at various times we've talked about, whether he would be interested in coming to serve on our board. And he said to me, he said, Katie, unless you have a required minimum on that board, I'm not joining it because I want everybody giving at a required minimum. And if I did come on, I would want that to change so that there's a real, seeing the role really in our instance as advancement from a fundraising standpoint. So I really appreciate it, where I've not had it listed, and our charter as like a defined, it's everyone knows what the understood minimum amount is, but it hasn't been listed in there and changing it so it is more formalized. But to Craig's point, I think also with different type, because there's a lot of different types of boards, and having been served on nonprofit boards, that are sometimes a little more of a working board, sometimes more of a governing board. I do think there is typically an expectation of giving in some way.
That's
Whether,
fair.
yeah. And um, so that's, I think,
It could
I
be
guess I'll just
time.
stop there.
Yeah, no, but it could also be time. I mean, for SEMC,
Exactly. 100%.
we don't have a giving minimum, but we do ask, at least for our organization, that everyone be a member of the organization, and that they give something because that 100%, it's good for fundraising. But so Cindy, I want you to respond to this, and then Selena, I'm going to end this section with you, and then we'll move on.
Um, we do not, it is in our bylaws that it's so in their three roles, it's very clear laid out what they are. And one is advocate, one is advisor, and one is fundraiser. I
Okay.
love the idea of adding advancement. I'm gonna have to think about how I could ease my board into an advancement advisory board. But it spells out that every board member is expected to give a gift or help get a gift. So you've also, maybe many people have heard that kind of give or get. And I was pretty, and I totally appreciate Katie, this potential board member saying that to you. At least where we were when we reestablished the advisory board, but this is before COVID, it needed to be changed. The board needed to be changed, and I was very concerned about demographics in particular. I wanted to have a broad swath of folks that would reflect the population and the stakeholders of Auburn. And so that's everything from gender to age to race to, I mean, all kinds of things. And so I wanted to be careful that a minimum amount, I didn't want to put in a minimum of $25, right? So that virtually anybody, or in $10, everybody can buy, virtually a cup of coffee at Starbucks. Not everybody, but when you're going to be talking about an advisory board, I didn't want to put in something that low, but so therefore there's not a specific amount that we require. But in partnership with my chair, because this is where the kind of the peer-to-peer and the collegiality that I mentioned before, the chair is the one that has said over and over and made phone calls and sent letters, we need 100% participation. I don't care, Jane Doe or John Doe board member, what it is. but I need you to give. And so that has been very effective. And we really have had, $100 gifts up to much larger than that. I guess I would love to get to a point perhaps where the board is able to give much more than maybe they do right now. Um, but I also just am mindful of kind of the other qualifications and qualities that other kinds of board members bring. So it's a little bit of a mix for us.
Yeah, and I think that's a really, again, if you've been asked to be on a board or you're investigating board service, to try and kind of get a vibe of what that giving expectation is. Can you contribute in different ways with your time? Can you bring connections that will open some of those doors? I think that that's really important. I'm watching our time now, so as it always happens, we're like it's going fast, but I want to talk a little bit about how you get on a board. We've all kind of talked about being on a board or the boards we work with, but like how does that actually happen? So Celine, I'm gonna put you in the hot seat for a minute here as someone who is newer, still in the first 10 years of your career. What did that look like for you to be asked to be on a board, or how did that happen?
Um, that's a great question. And so when I was in grad school, I, well, at my previous job, I started grad school and I was talking to one of my professors and was trying to find a way to find a new job. And one of those ways was I thought maybe I could intern somewhere. And I asked my professor to write a recommendation, and she was like, "Why are you interning? You have a full job, you have a full-time job. That doesn't make any sense." And I was like, "Okay, well, what what should I do then to like gain more experience that could help like advance me advance me in like job pools and things like that?" And she recommended that I actually join a board. So with that information and that advice, I started thinking about different nonprofits or organizations in my area that I am really excited about and interested in, and I value their mission because it aligns with my own personal mission, and began just doing or conducting like informational interviews with staff, just to not even to ask to be on a board, but to really just chat and ask them questions about their role, and how they got to their role. I applied for different scholarships that sometimes associations, like the Association of Fundraising Professionals, has a scholarship that they provide to emerging fundraisers to attend this large conference that they do every year. Um, and I received that, and my name was because I had already been talking to people on the board, and I applied to that opportunity. I was invited like maybe the next year or so. And I really think it was because like I was showing interest in the association. And for those who are early in their career, it's really less about where you start, but really how you show up in these types of situations and boards. Like, even if you can't give, $1,000, because I cannot do that, but I can give my time and I can give the knowledge that I have learned and my experiences and my perspective, because I know that that is valuable because, I deserve to be in that space as well. And I think it's easy for emerging museum professionals to feel as if like they don't belong on a board because they are emerging. But we actually do need emerging museum professionals because like emerging museum professionals are seeing firsthand how the museum world is changing, and like many EMPs are going to grad school for museum studies and learning about like the most up to date, I would hope, and relevant theories that are in the museum world today. And so I that's so all to say, if there is an organization that you are interested in, it doesn't even have to be like museum related. Like I love the arts, so I was just looking for arts related organizations that I could be a part of, and was looking at the type of roles that I also wanted to hopefully one day be in. And so I wanted to start surrounding myself with those types of people as well. Because in some ways, like you kind of become the people that you surround yourself with, right? So you start to kind of learn um, like the language and maybe some of the best practices. And then you start meeting some of their people. And then you start meeting more people. And then your network grows. And I would say that's been the most like fruitful part about this whole experience of board service is just being able to meet so many different people with different experiences and different paths to where they got to today. It's really cool to see, and it's just I feel that you can always learn something from someone, um, even if it's not something that maybe you are particularly interested in or align with, but I think there's always an opportunity for that learning moment. But yeah, I would
Thank you,
say,
Celine.
yeah.
No, that like that's, I mean, again, for somebody newer in their career, and I would just add to that, it's okay to like, I've, I see people, I'm like, I want to be on your board. How do I do that?
Yeah,
It is
yeah. Hmm.
there,
Yeah, and
it's okay to do that. You don't have to
yeah.
just always wait to be recruited. If it is something you're interested in, I think that you can definitely be a little forward and say, this is what I could, I give my opinions to people all the time that probably don't want them. I'm like, if I was on your board, this is what I would do.
And
But I
just like
think,
oh, sorry.
no,
Yeah.
go ahead, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, just like in fundraising, like if you don't ask, the answer is always going to be no. So you might as well ask and get the no for yourself and stop thinking that it's a no because
Right.
why are you doing
And we
that to
all have
yourself?
something to contribute to these boards. I think the trick is finding the one that is the right fit. And even, I wasn't trying to throw my fundraising board under the table. I was just now that I know how I can show up for that board. So that idea of like how you show up is as a member is really important. So we're right at time, but I want each of you to just we'll just do a quick round robin. What's one piece of advice you wish you had had before your first board role? And it could be from either side, either leading a board or being on a board. What's something you wish you'd known or someone would have told you? Cindy, I see you
I'll
clicked
start.
off.
I'll start. I'm going to say that I think I'm a pretty good listener anyway, but it's so important to be a good listener on a board. Again, for that collegiality, how am I going to support? How am I going to promote? But at the same time, to also not be afraid to speak up and offer an opinion or ask a question because you're on the board for a reason. You've either been asked for your experience, your expertise, who you know, whatever it is. Um, and so it's important to, of course, be respectful of all your board members and the staff and their knowledge and their role. But it's important that pairing together of listening and then also speaking up are really, I value it as a staff member and I value it as being a member of AAMG board and other work like that. So that's my closing thought.
Thank you. Craig.
I would sort of to build on what Cindy said, I would add observation. So taking time to observe and try to sort of sort out how the organization functions. What are the different relationships and who are the different people in the room? Because like any sort of human built environment or space, right? It can be a political space. There's different agendas, even though we're all kind of there working toward common goals. So getting to kind of know different board personalities and how the organization functions as a unit, I think is quite helpful.
It's good. Katie?
Yeah, I agree with Cindy and Craig. I certainly have agreed to join boards without reviewing bylaws, beforehand to understand, the foundational sort of guiding document of what you are supposed to be
Signed up
doing
for.
as why you're doing it. So, I mean, that alone, I think is really helpful, as well as, of course, like even meeting other board members, understanding really, are we talking about 3 times a year meeting, or are we talking about monthly? Like how, and are you expected as a board member to, are there also committees? So that adds on to the potential, sort of time and expectations. But one other thing I just thought I would mention about getting on boards that I think is worth considering in the museum context. I was trying to think about it. I'm coming from an art museum vantage point. So some of you can maybe chime in if you think about the non-art ones, because I know they exist. But thinking about even state organizations and local county or city organizations, for example. So the state of Utah Division of Arts and Museums, the state history board for which is also a state entity, historic preservation committees, that are often on a local level. I served and still serve on the public art advisory board committee for the city of Logan. Um, arts councils, even getting on committees first, sometimes with
Yeah,
and
it's a
finding
great
out
way.
it's a
Committees
really
are a
great.
great way in.
And if someone's interested in you and coming into the fold of their organization and they ask you to come on a committee first, I see
Say
that as
yes.
a really healthy organization, one that's thinking about let's get them on a committee first and see if they enjoy, this work before we ask them to come and serve on the board. So it's often, sometimes it's not going straight on a board, but serving on a committee that has a mix of board and non-board members on it.
I think that's great advice. Yeah, committee work. Forgot about that. All right, Celine, I'm giving you the final word. No pressure.
I echo what everyone has said. Just yeah. Um, for me, one piece of advice I wish I had was to be a little bit more honest and realistic about the actual time that I have to serve on a board,
Yes.
As an emerging professional, it's really easy to say yes to everything because you just want to gather all that experience. But then after a while, you kind of burn yourself out. But also like being intentional about your yeses as well. And if people do ask and you are not ready to be on a board yet, it's okay to say, I maybe not right now, but ask me maybe in the next year. So just right now is not the greatest time because I've had to step down from a board because I was not realistic with my time with grad school. So I realized that I could not do work boards and grad school at the same time. And that was really disappointing for me just because I was really excited about the organization, but the time was just not right for me in that moment. So because at the end of the day, like when you're a board member, you want to be engaged, you want to be participative. And because like Zinnia was saying, it's a we situation. And if one person falls off, then everyone else kind of affects everyone as well. It has an impact. So, and people ask you to be on the board for a reason. So,
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely fair to say yes, but not right now. And I have had, people say that to me, and I actually really appreciate it when it's like, I really want to do a good job for this board. I don't have this space right now, but you're on a radar. And once you're on somebody's radar, so to the conversation about networking, yes, boards are absolutely good ways to network. So I'm just communication, clarity, advancing collegiality, all of that. I appreciate all of the input that you have had, the experiences, sharing them with me and with everyone who stayed on this call. I'm sorry we're a few minutes over, but we did pretty well given, all we're trying to accomplish. So thank you all. And Heather, I'll give you the final word.
Well, we so appreciate everyone for again joining us and talking about what it means to serve on a board. I hope you all are leaving today's conversation with more insights and more encouragement to go out there and seek the board position that you really want. So I didn't see any additional questions in the chat or in the Q&A. So we are at time, and we just enjoy you being here, and go enjoy your evening and see us again on the launch pad. Thank you, guys.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.